Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic video, and in this one I'm going to go over some of my thoughts on, I suppose, if they ever do a third Avatar animated series, some of the ideas, potential storylines I think that would be interesting to see them do in a third series. So I think it's a pretty good time to do this, given that it seems like our big thing that they've announced coming up is obviously the new live action show on Netflix, and how a lot of fans are particularly interested in that because it's just going over the same story again, and in a universe that is, in the grand scheme of things, still very young. There's in no way any, I don't think you can say that we're in danger of running out of content or anything like that. There's so much that can be explored. Why are they deciding to go over something again instead of explore something new? So let's present some of those ideas and actually, discuss what could happen in a third series. So I think the immediate thing is that, look, I think everyone expects it to a degree, and I think it makes sense that regardless of who you decide the main characters to be, you are setting a third series in an era where the Avatar, the present day Avatar, is an Earth Avatar. It makes sense that this would be this general thing that they continue throughout the series that they have, that they're following the Avatar cycle, and maybe it's not directly in a row, but that whether we're going forward or back in time from Korra, that we're dealing with an Earth Kingdom Avatar. And I think that makes sense, just so you can have that, I suppose at some point down the line you can say you have a series covering an Avatar from each element. So after that, I think out of the way, that you more or less have to do that, because I don't really see too much benefit to just, oh, we'll do another air Avatar, or we'll do another, Fire Nation, or we'll do another Water Tribe Avatar. I think this makes the most sense, and then you can round it off with a Fire Avatar at some point later on. The big question to me is what I just said there. Do you set it in the past, basically from Korra, or do you decide to go forward? And I think it's an important decision to make because of, I think, part of the reaction to Korra as a series, that it gets some criticism because of, oh, technology is too far advanced. We kind of lost some of the traditional aspects of the series because it's too modern. And if we go potentially 70, 80 years on after Korra, the next Avatar, you kind of have to assume that, given how fast technology is advancing, we're absolutely getting into region of yeah, we could be seeing internet in Avatar, and do we want to see that? And what exactly would that do? I don't think it's a completely terrible idea, because the idea is that then you have this complete situation that they touch on at times in some of the Avatar comics as well as Korra, that technology is allowing non-benders to basically kind of do just as much as benders. And in the age of I suppose internet and stuff like that, you could potentially get into a time period where just everything is so modern that the bending arts are borderline forgotten, to the point where barely anyone is a bender. The whole idea of the Avatar being this hugely respected thing that everyone knows about could actually become something that is forgotten over time. I think I've seen that idea in a few fanfics over the years that I actually think is a really good idea. The idea that you go an Avatar into the future where the cycle continues regardless of unless the cycle breaks because of the Avatar dying in the Avatar state. The cycle is going to continue even if the person is not trained. Even if they never properly discover their bending or use it, it will still continue. And I suppose that could be part of the history already, that potentially Avatars have come and gone without ever properly, I suppose, getting to be the Avatar. But I don't really know if that is necessarily the case, but to fit the whole timeline problem that we sort of have, that would sort of have to be the case. But anyway, so going into the future is... It's an option that I think has some ideas. I think the fandom would probably prefer to go back, just because right now we have these sort of set points in the universe. We have beginnings basically, and of course you could always go pre-beginnings if you want to go like much earlier and develop the world even before all of this stuff. But I think for the most part you have between beginnings, basically the origin of the Avatar, and like Yang Chen more or less as like these kind of key points. And between Wan and Yang Chen, there's not actually a ton that we know about in the universe for the most part. We can look back at the list of avatars that we see, and we can see a variety of the avatars in between there. Like Avatar Jafar is like a consistent design for the character, even if we don't know anything about that specific character. And you can go back and see specific character designs and so on. I think you could choose like borderline any one of those Earth avatars and tell that story. The only thing I think at some point you need to avoid is the video game stuff with Hoondoon. One of the avatars dealt with him, but I think that's easy enough to avoid. And then, like, you could go close-ish to Wan and deal with, I suppose, something along the lines of the complete, like the origin of the Avatar as it becomes a sort of like known entity in the world, and how the specific training of different avatars works, how the different nations begin to know about the details of it, like that spread the world that it is a reincarnation cycle and to expect it, how the discovery of the avatars begins to work. That's stuff you can deal with in those early avatars if you decided to go for like Wan is technically a fire avatar, so then it would go like air, water, earth. So the earth avatar would actually be like the last of the first cycle, which I actually think it could be a really cool idea that actually makes a lot of sense, where like there's been a few avatars to sort of establish it, and here's like the first time of like an avatar as like the one just before it goes back around to being a fire avatar. That could be very cool, plus the idea that you're still dealing with the world as it's sort of forming in a way. We don't know the full exact details of like when exactly like the Fire Nation as we know it now becomes the Fire Nation specifically. From the history we know the basic idea. We don't know exactly when though in the world. Those sort of things would be like pretty interesting. And then you've got all this time between then and Yang Chen to cover as well. So to me, it's one of those kind of interesting ones where I see it being a little bit more interesting to go back, but I can see from the creator's perspective as them feeling that probably going forward would perhaps be the more interesting one. I think they just have to be extremely careful with how tonally they do that sort of a story, given that you would probably have to deal with like the internet being a thing, it being like the Avatar universe's version of effectively modern day, and how you do that without just, I think, removing like the core of what Avatar actually is. So just because of how, I suppose, tricky that could be to, deal with, you maybe would kind of be like err on the side of caution and like fill in what's happened before, rather than kind of basically expanding the like outer edges of the universe. Why don't you fill in some of the stuff that the kind of 10,000 years that we are kind of dealing with for the most part. So I think that's where it makes sense. Do you go like male avatar, female avatar? I don't think it matters too much. I can see the point for it being like, okay, maybe you want to go back and forth. Like, Aang was a guy, Korra was a girl, you have a guy, and then you have the fire avatar for like a fourth series be a girl, and kind of go about it that way. I think that would be pretty interesting, because then like you kind of cover those kind of interesting ideas of like the only other like Earth avatar we know about is Kyoshi, so it would be nice to actually have a kind of male Earth avatar to kind of compare her story to. Similarly, like Roku as like a male fire avatar, it would be nice to have a known female fire avatar to compare to. So just cover the different kind of styles of characters. That would be a good thing. So I think for the most part we can settle on the idea of, in the era of an Earth avatar, pre-Yang Chen at some point, in between Wan and Yang Chen, somewhere along those lines. Then what do you do? I suppose, how do you set up the show? And this is where some of the ideas that I have, I think, would come in of like, does the Avatar have to be the absolute main character of the show? Basically, can the Avatar just be one of the main characters and not necessarily be the main character? I think that would be something interesting, and it kind of avoids the potential, like, series being overly repetitive of always having to cover the Avatar's training and them sort of coming into their own. Instead, what if it was like you start off with a group of characters like maybe from the Earth Kingdom, and they go on a journey to do their own specific thing, and they happen to along the way come across the Avatar who's just kind of going about things normally, you know, dealing with problems across the world. He gets kind of involved in their issue and becomes part of the group that way, where basically you have the Avatar in this series take on the like Toph role, more or less, the character who's like introduced a little bit later on, having had like, you know, half a season, a full season covering some other characters, and maybe like you do some world building to set up like the new Avatar, like this is the type of character he is. He's actually like really strong, but like he's just recently finished his training or something like that. You know, how do we kind of go about finding him, given that like he could be anywhere just after finishing his training. So I think that's you know, something that's like pretty interesting to cover for sure. And along with that, I think another point that I bring up would be that this is perhaps more of like if you went the other way, but like the idea of if you do a new series, like having a spirit as like a noted character in the series, that more fits if the series would be set after Korra, and the idea of having a kind of like spirit as part of the main team, I think would be really interesting and present a completely different kind of style on the series that we haven't really had before, outside of like the little bit we got of just the idea of here is a main character who's a spirit presenting that different perspective on things, is friends with humans, so you can be open. I think that's just in general something we sort of need in the franchise, is a spirit character who is friendly enough to just talk about things. But I don't think it's essential that be part of like a series if it is set in the past, because it wouldn't necessarily make a ton of sense. I think you could get away with it, but you kind of have to explain away why there aren't more spirits who are friends with humans and so on. But yeah, like obviously we're being really vague here. No series has been confirmed or anything like that, so we can only talk about general ideas for a series. And so to me, just changing the format up a little bit of like the Avatar being a character introduced a little bit later on changes things, and that means his introduction, like you get the introduction of the Avatar as a sort of celebrity character almost, because we're so used to like we get to know Korra or Aang from the start, and so we see basically other characters like interact with them from the perspective of we already know them, whereas it'd be really cool to just have it just be these kind of normal people, citizens, and they're our main characters as they meet the Avatar for the first time. And especially kind of back in the past when you're not dealing with like the Avatar coming out of hiding after like a war or anything like that. The Avatar is a much more kind of, I suppose, kind of well-established thing in the world, where like it's everyone knows roughly where in the cycle of training and stuff like that the Avatar is. That'd be a pretty huge thing to just meet that character, meet the legendary Avatar, which hasn't necessarily been a kind of thing we as the audience have kind of really had a chance to like experience in the series, of just you know, getting teased about an Avatar and then, oh cool, here he is. He's actually a really interesting character. We're so used to every single time the avatar is the complete focus of whatever story we're dealing with is. So it'd be cool to get it kind of the other way. And then like when he does maybe become more of a focus in the series, that makes like the actual character development you do with him all the more interesting, as like him becoming part of like a group which has previously gone completely under the radar now changes because you have you have one of the most famous people in the world suddenly part of this group. They're the little kind of dynamics that would be interesting. The other thing with an Earth avatar is that if they have a kind of spirit animal, like it would probably be a badger mole or something like that. You could have it be like an ostrich horse if you absolutely wanted to, but or even like introduce a new kind of type of animal that would kind of make sense, kind of, you know, going along the lines of like, okay, Naga, sort of land-based animal. That'd be pretty cool to get something like that. Like imagine it was like a tigerdillo or something like that. Those type of things would be really cool to just see another kind of culture kind of explored in that way. Like we've already had like the you know, we've seen dragons, we've seen sky bison, of course, now the polar bear dog. It would be cool to get like more heavily explored, like an animal that isn't the obvious one for like an Earth avatar to have, of the badger mole. So that's always an option with any series that you do, is just the kind of animal companion for the avatar. Obviously this video isn't really about going into specifically what sort of plot you could deal with, but if you are setting it in between Wan and Yang Chen, you can have it be any sort of a moment that sort of helps create the world and the way it is kind of as we go forward into Yang Chen and so on. In terms of like, you could have it take place like during the time period where like the south leaves the north, and it's the like the establishment of the Southern Water Tribe. You can have it be during the time period where like the Foggy Swamp Tribe kind of breaks off and forms its own thing. You can have it, you know, cover any of these kind of different time periods, like especially with like Ba Sing Se, like you could cover like pre-walls, pre the city kind of being above ground, and more old Ba Sing Se where it's below grounds and the kind of crystal catacombs. And if you are dealing with an Earth avatar, that's a really cool idea of just going back to pre-Ba Sing Se, I suppose the capital of the Earth Kingdom being such a kind of walled off place as it is for most of the universe as we know it, in that we only know from allusions to the fact that Ba Sing Se was very different so long ago that there actually was a deeper history there. So I think that there's just that obvious stuff that you can do with a universe like this where it is all connected together, of just set it during a time where you help to establish some of that stuff. Like, was there a war going on, and was that the reason for the walls like needing to be built? And even then, why build like multiple sections of walls like the way it is? So lots and lots of options that you have for sure. And as I said, especially if you're setting this like earlier on in the cycle, like the first Earth Kingdom avatar, that's a really, really cool time period to deal with, where so little about the world as we know it would be established. You have even less technology to deal with back then, so bending would be this really, really big thing. And especially like only like a couple of avatars in, like, yes, there'd be lots of benders in the world, but like not as many as I suppose there even would be as we see it in Avatar or Korra. You still would have to assume that like that relatively early on with the Line Turtles leaving, that it still takes a while for bending to like properly become like as big of a thing as it is. So there's lots of that sort of stuff, and even if it takes like a long time for the styles of each bending element to form, like that would be cool as well. Like, what if you set it like where it's an Earth avatar during the time of like Oma and Shu, and the Earth avatar has to learn from Oma how to actually do that sort of stuff, do that bending, given and link the history together, and so on. So That'd be my idea for a series. Like, even then, like, I don't think you have to go down the road of like what if they had a series where like the Avatar, I'm kind of saying like, becomes a notable character kind of a season or so into the show. Like, you can also do it in a way where, like, what if the Avatar was just a recurring notable character who kind of came in and out? Like, what if you had the Avatar be in a, like, Order of the White Lotus position where we're dealing with characters on, like, a certain level, and the Avatar would just come in and out at times to help during the really big moments. Never was, like, a proper part of the group, but always, as I said, like, had that aura of this hero of the world at that point in time. Appeared at the moments when he was absolutely needed. Because again, like, especially if you have it be like a more established Avatar and your main characters are still kind of kids, teenagers, it would make a ton of sense for like the Avatar to just randomly decide to join them on their journey if there's like a big age gap. So you could have them just kind of appear and do some kind of big kind of heroic things and then kind of leave. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this video. Bit of a random one, but it's been something I've wanted to talk about basically since the live-action Netflix show announcement. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on what a third Avatar animated series could be about and some of the ideas that I had here. So yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say in this video. Links in the description to my Patreon page where you can obviously become a patron of mine, and depending on what tier you come in at, you can either just help to support the channel, or you can choose a topic that will be done in one of these discussion topic videos. So that's always a big thing. I think it's the $5 tier. If you come in at that, you get to choose a topic for one of these videos and basically really direct what type of discussion there is. And then if you come in at the $3 tier, you get access to all my Patreon exclusive videos, which at this point in time is, I think, 11 videos, 10 of which are my top 10 anime series, where I go through one video on each of the shows on my list and talk through what they are, why I like them, and so on. So there's 10 of them, and then I think there's one video of me building a Lego set as well on camera. So check that stuff out if you want to become a patron and help support the channel. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.